Chapter 4. A Mother Without a Face. A Lonely Childhood. All I am, or can be, I owe to my angel mother. Abraham Lincoln. Imagine yourself for one moment in your life not being able to see the face of your mother, not only in person but also in a photograph. Would you spend the rest of your life trying to imagine what her face looked like in your mind only to end up unable to do so? This must be a frustrating experience that hounded Tony Pizarro in the past. His only consolation was the picture of his Auntie Liwanag de Leon de la Cruz, which he always kept. She was his mother's sister, who along with his Auntie Isabel Sabino Pizarro, took care of him as he was growing up in this world. He was 4.5 years old, too young to retain a memory, when Tony Pizarro's mother, Esther de Leon, died of malaria. It was liberation time, and the combined American and Filipino forces were pursuing the retreating Japanese army. Everything was in chaos. The Pizarro family had been forced to relocate and hide in the mountains during the bombing of their town by the Japanese troops. When it stopped, the family returned to their homes with lingering dark memories. In the devastation, no one took notice, or cared enough, to look for a keepsake for the youngest child Tony, a treasured photograph of Esther, by which he could remember the face of his mother. Looking back, the feeling he was not that important in the scheme of things or that he was not loved, maybe even ignored as the last of 6 children, must have crossed Tony's mind. Perhaps, too, the family simply could not help it. Photography was not easily available then, especially during wartime. Sadly, he was not able to hold on to the memory of one of the faces he ever gleaned when he first saw the light of the day. Tony's mother was born on April 18, 1910 in Limay, Bataan, a neighboring town of Orion, and passed away on August 20, 1945 at the age of 35. His mother had a brother whose name he could not remember. His maternal grandfather, Sixto de Leon, was a widower who married a woman whom Tony remembers as Impong Camela from Limay, Bataan, a neighboring town of Orion. They had 4 children, Coling, Ligaya, Liwanag, and Birding. They all lived in Rosario, Cavite except for Coling, who got married and resided in Grace Park, Caloocan City in Metro Manila. When Liwanag settled in Rosario with her sailor husband because of its proximity to the U.S. Naval Base in Sangley Point, her 2 other siblings joined her. Ligaya was also married to a former sailor. When Birding got married, he settled in Kawit, Cavite. Just like many folks, male members of the households typically join the United States Navy due to their close proximity to the U.S. Naval Base in nearby Subic Base and the U.S. Naval Base in Sangley Point, Cavite. Tony was always alone when he was growing up because of the demise of his mother. At times Tony would look at the relatives of his mother and imagine if any of them had a facial similarity to her. He would try to reconstruct her image from their faces even though they were just half-sisters. To this day he has kept his Auntie Liwanag's picture to remind him of what his mother in all probability must have looked like. "Your mother was a beautiful woman," his Auntie Liwanag once told Tony. She was hardworking and had business acumen despite her limited formal education. She would buy several commodities, including rice at wholesale price and sell and deliver them to her customers at retail price. Sometimes, Tony thought how she would have impacted his life had she lived long enough. One thing he would have wanted was for her to know how successful he had become. "I was so unhappy when I was a child, which gave me dark images of my past," Tony confessed. Added to this misfortune was the fact his father soon remarried to a widow, Lutgarda Valenzuela, who had 6 children of her own, increasing the brood the couple had to take care of to 12. Another child, Aurea, Tony's stepsister, was born of his father's recent marriage. "My memory of my childhood was sad," Tony remembers. "I always longed for the love of my deceased mother." The absence of a mother's love marked his impressionable years as a young boy of 4 who had no one to give him what every child craved for, that is, to be nourished and cared for with unconditional love, taught with wisdom, and held tightly to one's heart as only a mother could. With nary an adult to attend to him, especially the love and affection of his mother, Tony at his early age apparently learned to do things on his own. He would give himself a bath, dress himself up, and compete for his share of food at the dinner table. He never heard anybody asking him, "How are you doing? Can I help you?" He had to learn how to survive on his own, although Tony remembers a nice old lady called Manong and her husband named Simeon who looked after him in his early years. They took care of us after the death of our mother. Their family was allowed by my father to live closer to our home as caregivers and somehow took care of me after my mother died. Tony's luxurious lifestyle today is indeed a far cry from the stark circumstances of growing up poor in a remote province in the Philippines during the 1940s. Their modest home was a one-room affair with a little porch at the entrance, smaller than any of the rooms in his palatial mansion. Sheltered under one roof, the 13 children and 2 adults in the family, all slept on the bamboo floor of the small house. A large woven sleeping mat called banig would be spread on the floor and the kids would lie side by side while the parents slept in one corner of the house. They would sleep under a huge mosquito net, protected from the pests that buzzed around in the evenings. That sleeping arrangement is now but a distant memory lost in the satin covers of the massive, king-sized bed of his stately Tuscan-style suite. Basically, I grew up like a gypsy or an orphan, Tony recalled. Growing up, I saw my father as a likable man, very honest, kind-hearted and had a well-balanced mind. I saw him from a distance surrounded by his brothers, cousins and friends as they enjoyed get-togethers in the afternoons in our humble house in Orion. Tony stayed with his Auntie Liwanag's family in Rosario, Cavite for 3 years from 1951 to 1952, at a tender age of 9 years old. Tony's assigned sleeping space was the entrance porch or balcony outside the main house. Whenever it rained, misty rain from the outside of the windowless balcony would spray his face as he tried to get to sleep. This was because there was no space inside the house. The family had 7 kids of their own, which later increased to 9. Those enduring dark years, which still linger on in his mind, motivated him to pursue higher ambitions in life. There was no electricity or running water in their town when he was growing up. Gas lamps or gaseras made of a small bottle filled with kerosene and wick that protruded at the top would be used to find one's way around in the evening. There was no indoor plumbing. That's how I learned to be responsible. Without being told or asked, my daily task was to make sure that the bunga, clay pot, was full of water. I would fetch water from a well outside the house and store them in a huge bunga usually placed on a bat allen, an open-air wet kitchen with bamboo slats for a floor that allowed water to wash down between the grooves and onto the pusali or ground below. To relieve oneself, one had to go to the outhouse in the backyard, which was a good walk from the house. Sometimes, one would go far away to the rice fields where no one could see him doing his business. It was indeed a far cry from the huge and luxurious bathrooms in each of the rooms of the Pizarro mansion. But at that time, he did not know the difference. It was the only life he knew, and apparently enjoyed. Tony's older brothers were Ernesto, who got married to Consuelo, Elpidio, who got married to Eufemia, Dionisio, who got married to Encar, and Seferino, who got married to Virginia. All were born in Orion, Bataan, except for Virginia, who was born in Watsonville, California in the USA. His sister, Ida, was unmarried. He was told another sister passed away at childbirth. He was not very close to his siblings due to their age differences as they were older than him. Besides, they had their own growing pains to take care of since they too lost their mother, and had to deal with a stepmother and a busy father. Eventually, Ernesto and Dionisio, Ernie, joined the U.S. Navy in 1955, way ahead of Tony. Both brothers stayed beyond 20 years of active duty service like many of their peers and retired thereafter. However, it was not the same wide road that their little brother would take, but a detour. Remarkably like an ace up the sleeve of destiny, Tony did what was inconceivable for man from the socioeconomic underclass. He had broken the ceiling for the promotion of enlisted men, for he started from lowest to the highest rank in 16 short years and later got selected for an officer rank commissioned by the U.S. President. His father was right after all. His rise in the ranks gave proof of his father's well-placed trust in his youngest son's outstanding acumen. Ernesto, the oldest, had all his 9 children later migrate to the United States and remained a resident of San Diego after his retirement from the U.S. Navy. Dionisio, who later changed his name to Ernie, returned to the Philippines to retire comfortably where all his children lived, but later moved to San Diego. The third brother, Seferino, on the other hand, had also joined the U.S. Navy and met his wife Virginia while stationed at U.S. Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. After 4 years of active duty, he left the U.S. Navy upon the insistence of his wife and settled in Watsonville, California, where he was employed at the Goodyear Tire Manufacturing Company. Tony's sister Ida de Leon Pizarro remained single and stayed with their Auntie Isabel in Orion, Bataan. Ernesto had 9 children, Elpidio had 5, Dionisio, Ernie, 4, and Seferino had no child of his own but adopted the 3 children of his wife Virginia from her first marriage. His sister Ida, who never married, had adopted a girl named Mon, and lastly, Aurea, his stepsister, was married to Eddie Cuevas, had 7 children and now all live in the U.S. Tony, his sister Ida, and stepsister Aurea are the only ones alive today.